A reading from the first letter of Paul to the Corinthians. Brothers and sisters, if I preach the gospel, this is no reason for me to boast, for an obligation has been imposed on me, and woe to me if I do not preach it. If I do so willingly, I have a recompense, but if unwillingly, then I have been entrusted with a stewardship. What then is my recompense? That when I preach, I offer the gospel free of charge, so as not to make full use of my right in the gospel. Although I am free in regard to all, I have made myself a slave to all, so as to win over as many as possible. To the weak, I became weak, to win over the weak. I have become all things to all, to save at least some. All this I do for the sake of the gospel, so that I too may have a share in it. The word of the Lord.
Our second reading for this Sunday comes from the first letter of Paul to the Corinthians. We have been reflecting on compassion, specifically the compassion of Jesus Christ. In the first reading, Job gives voice to the many suffering people of this world. Look at the way he described his life: a drudgery, a prolonged slavery, no freedom at all, no joy. Working as though for wages only, but not for fulfillment. Restlessness. This is a depiction that I think many people can resonate with. How do we respond to them? How do we handle our own suffering? The second reading gives us the example of a missionary, a disciple of Christ, St. Paul. Going from place to place, he sees different conditions, human conditions. But how will a missionary disciple respond? The main response of St. Paul to different human conditions and situations is first and foremost to share with them the Word of God. I know some people will say, "Oh, I need food, I need clothing, I need shelter." Yes, we need all of those basic necessities. But we should not forget, we also need the Word of God. And St. Paul is of the conviction that he, as a disciple of Christ, as a missionary, is under obligation, he used the word compulsion, to preach the Word of God. And the Word of God is his first contribution to people in whatever condition they may be. And look at his description. He is a model disciple. Bearing the Word of God, he becomes all things to all people. To the weak, he becomes weak. To those in sorrow, he is one in their sorrow. Look at this manifestation of compassion on the part of St. Paul, and a beautiful description: becoming all things to all people. To the weak, he becomes weak. To the slaves, he becomes a slave. To those in sorrow, he becomes a sorrowful person. The compassion that comes from the Word of God. This is not just emotionalism. This is not just sentimentalism on the part of St. Paul. It comes from a deep calling. I have been called by Jesus to proclaim the Word of God, and woe to me if I do not fulfill it. bearing the Word of God as his main weapon, he goes out and consoles people. The main act of compassion and solidarity with people, especially those who are suffering, is to feed them with the Word of God. My dear brothers and sisters, I am encouraging you to engage in corporal works of mercy, giving food, giving drink, shelter, clothing. All of those are holy acts. But please add one thing, and this is a spiritual act of compassion. Share the Word of God. Let us not underestimate the power of the Word of God to encourage people, to strengthen them, to give them hope in the midst of their suffering. When people cannot cling to money, to medicine, to people, even to families, where they have the Word of God, they experience light, they experience courage. So, go out like St. Paul. Go out, seek out the weak, the pained, the sorrowing. Give them all your love and compassion. And let us not forget, feed them with the Word of God.